a chance to look through your list of books and your hobbies and your habits and your education, and I'm thinking, if we talk about everything that he's got in his bio, we're going to need more memory. Marty, we've only got 1.21 gigawatts. What are we going to do? We don't have enough memory for this guy.
Well, thank you.
So you pick out what you'd like.
Well, firstly, I'd like to go into how my Masonic career, how I got into it in the first place. And it's one reason why I brought this book, because part of this book is based on my doctoral dissertation, my first one.
And what's the title?
This one is Freemasonry and the Building of Western Civilization.
Okay.
Okay. And I'll say the subtitle is Recognizing Their Works in Mathematics, Science, Religion, and Great Engineering Works of the World.
Awesome.
Okay. And I have another book which is basically totally my dissertation at that time, which I converted to the popular reading style, because it's very technical in nature.
Okay, so you went from egghead to simpleton, so I can that's fair?
Average person.
And by the way, you did write these, correct? These are
yes,
yours?
these are all mine. These are all my works. So at any rate, how I gravitated towards Masonry was I had always had it in my mind. I was curious about it. And I was working on my hypothesis and my thesis, my dissertation rather, and trying to prove my point. I kind of ran out of things out here in the general popular world.
And what was your point?
Places to work. But there were other people here long before Columbus.
Okay.
Old world people.
Okay.
Okay. And I had found, and others had found, all kinds of things, trade routes and all sorts of things here that were laid out in using European units of measure. Okay. And maybe I'll go into that a little bit in a minute. But, but at any rate, I ran out of places to go. And I thought to myself, everything I looked at, I kept thinking to myself, it just had Masonic fingerprints all over it because of our Masonically the talent and penchant for building things.
Oldest fraternity on the planet.
Exactly. I said it just had that flavor, that smell about it, but I couldn't find it anymore. I said, well, if I'm going to prove my theory, I'm going to have to join the lodge and get my hands on materials that only a Mason can get their hands on.
Okay.
So I did, and the same week that I became a Master Mason, I contacted the Grand Lodge, Livingston Library down in the city, and I told the head librarian down there what I was doing, and they started sending me things.
Right, yeah. Which is a program they have for any Mason.
Yeah.
All you have to do is request something to read, and they'll gladly mail it to you.
And they did. They actually, at one point, I had to tell them to stop. I couldn't read it all.
Yeah.
I mean, they took a lot of time that I had to borrow. So I read all that, and it really helped. Then I said to them, do you know of anybody in the fraternity who also has researched this sort of thing? And he said, yeah, there's a guy upstate. His name was, Richard Rowney Connell. He's probably passed away by now because he wasn't a young man. And this is like around 1999, 2000, 2001. Not even before that. It was even before that.
Oh, so he wasn't young like us.
No.
Yeah, I see.
It was even before that. And we had several conversations, wrote back and forth. He sent me some of his articles he had written. By the way, he was a member of one of the Masonic Lodge of Research.
Not heard of that.
And he sent me one of his articles, which basically proved my point completely. And that's how I got involved in it. And as I go along, I found out a lot of these things, which I don't know if you can pick it up on the cover, but a lot of these, and I have some different photographs and drawings here, of these markers that I and others have found. They were obviously put here by Europeans to mark these pathways.
Yeah.
Okay, because they were laid out in European units of measure. Okay, I'll give you a quick little thing for you to do, and I'll ask you to get out your calculator off your computer or your cell phone or something like that.
All right.
And do that right now.
Sure.
Okay. And this is again
72. Oh, sorry.
And this is one of the points that have no explanation other than somebody had their fingers on it. Okay. Do you know who was the first to accurately calculate the circumference of the Earth?
No.
It was a Greek. He was living in North Africa at the time, Eratosthenes. He died in, I think, 250 something BC. Okay, and he was a mathematician.
And he nailed it correctly?
He was correct within 1%.
Close enough. Wow.
Okay.
They still thought the Earth was flat.
Well, that's what we're told, but there were some who did not think that. Okay.
Of course.
And this guy in particular, when I see this, read this, and Euclid and others, the things that they were able to do, all they had to work with was their brain.
Mm-hmm.
And what he did was he had men hired, and to keep in mind where he was, North Africa, it's just a couple of degrees off the equator. And he had them go out in predetermined measured distances apart from each other, put sticks in the ground, and at high noon they would measure the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
And just by that, he was able to correctly calculate the circumference of the Earth, but he was only off by 1%. Okay.
Wow.
And what he was also doing at that time, he was creating the beginnings, the rudiments of trigonometry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Wow.
So now keep that in mind. Okay.
Yeah.
And I've said that we don't give the ancients enough credit for this. Now, getting back to your calculator there. Are you at all familiar with the unit of measure called the rod?
Yes.
Probably not since elementary school have we dealt with it.
It's about 1.5 meters tall.
It's 16.5 feet.
16.5
Right,
feet.
okay. And it's a very old unit of measure. Well, keep in mind that at the time it was in use, the known world was very small. It was limited to the Mediterranean basin.
Sure.
Okay. So it was still an accurate unit of measure. Okay. Now, we're using the English mile in this country. Us and Liberia were the last people on the planet to use the English mile, 5280. You divide 5280 by 16.5, and what do you come up with?
320.
320. Okay. Now, what is the circumference of the Earth?
Big.
It's rounded off to 25,000
miles.
Okay, right. It's a little bit more at the equator than it is at the poles. That's only natural because as the Earth cooled, it would expand into the center and so on.
Yeah, it wobbles as
Right,
it
right,
travels.
right. So 25,000 miles. Okay, so now multiply 320 times 25,000. What do you come up with?
8 million.
A nice, even, whole number with nothing left over.
Yeah, looks like my bank account. Nothing left over.
What does that tell us?
Well, he didn't have to round off very much, did he?
It tells us. That doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah.
It tells us that whoever devised the unit of measure of the rod knew that it was equally divisible by the circumference of the Earth.
Oh, wow. Okay. And what was he going to do with it from there?
Again, it became a standard unit of measure, just like our mile or the metric system is elsewhere, okay?
Yeah.
And who did it, we'll never know. Oh, we do know it wasn't Eratosthenes, because there's nothing mentioned in any of his research or writings of that, okay? But as the known world grew, they needed more efficient units of measure. In came the Romans, and that went all the way from the British Isles to India.
Yeah.
It's too inefficient to use a small number like that, so they came up with the Roman mile, which is even 5,000 feet.
Okay.
Okay. Then came the British Empire. The sun never sets on the British Empire. Okay. So they came up with their own number, 5280, which was in use for a long time, but it wasn't standardized and made the rule until Elizabeth I. Okay. So again, much as when the first atom bomb went off, they said it was equivalent to, I think it was 10 or 15,000 tons of dynamite.
Yeah.
Within a day, they came up with the kiloton. It was a much more efficient way of reference. You talk about massive distances between stars.
Yeah.
You're talking of trillions and trillions of miles. So rather than put all these zeros down,
Yeah.
they use the light year.
Yeah.
It's the same with this. Same thing. It's much just a matter of being more efficient. So maybe at a future date I can go into that and bring that dissertation in and talk into it. I even have maps to show some of these trade routes. And again, these units of measures, okay, what we take to be the oldest ones were laid out using the rod.
Okay, sure.
Which also tells us about when this went on.
It gets back to that.
And then it comes,
traceable.
some were Roman miles, and what we take as being the later ones was the English miles, so on and so forth. So again, I was able to prove my point, and they liked it. So it was the University of Dublin, okay, where I did this. It was one of the early distance independent study types.
So you've got 60 books published that you've written, either yourself or co-author, what have you.
No, by myself.
Okay.
Even most of the art, almost all of the artwork is mine.
So you're the guy with 25 hours in a day. I've been looking for you. I want the secret to
8
that.
days in a week.
Yeah, exactly.
I could use 10 sometimes.
And so of those 60, you have one favorite, one that you wish everybody read and you think is worth reading.
That would have been the one that I was just describing.
Okay.
Was the one that was my original master's thesis, doctoral dissertation in archaeology. That's one of them. I have also my ones on botany and mycology. I have basically I did immediately upon I was almost done with my doctoral, presenting my doctoral dissertation on archaeology. I had already done a lot of work and a lot of writing on wild medicinal and edible plants, fungi, and I was studying how these ancient cultures used them in their livelihoods. And I asked my mentor, can I do anything with this? And he said, why don't you do a postdoctorate? And I related it to my archaeological studies because I was still studying ancient cultures, but in a different tangent.
Okay.
And I got my diplomas like 3 weeks apart. I submitted them at the same time.
How many diplomas do you have?
9.
And so now, where do you find enough time for education and all the writing? And how many schools have you attended? And which ones?
Oh gosh, here at stateside, I did my lower degrees were in Empire State College. And then I did my graduate work through it's been sold and bought and resold so many times, I don't even know what it's called today because I never subscribed to any of the newsletters. It was Columbia Pacific out of California. And then I started to do studies in the other ones, in England and Ireland and Belgium and Scotland and the one had campuses in India and the Caribbean as well, but I didn't have any contact with them. But the higher ones were outside this country.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how many degrees total?
9.
9 degrees. Taking how much time? If you were to add them all together?
20.
Damn.
20 years.
That's ambitious.
Yeah.
That's ambitious. But you know what? Makes for a damn good read, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. But I hasten to point out to people is the old saying, if you're so smart, why ain't you rich? You know, is that my interests, and as I go down the list of the subject areas that they're in, you'll see that they're all obscure. For instance, archaeology, botany and mycology,
Wait, mycology,
That's fungi.
I knew you were going to be a fun guy. Okay.
Fun guy.
Yeah. All
You
right.
set me up for that one.
Of course I did.
But at any rate,
I have an accelerated degree in smartassery.
okay, that's fine too. That comes in very handy sometimes. Theology, political science, and the last one was in physical and life sciences. And again, back in the blogging days when it was so popular, I was constantly writing and submitting things and getting paid for it too.
Oh, okay.
And at one point, I had 500 articles I had posted online. Plus, I had 100 articles posted by the New York State Museum, all kinds of different things I've done.
Is that something you can make an actual living off of, or is it just
No,
kind of
no,
fun money, so
no,
to speak?
no.
Maybe gas money?
Maybe when gas was cheap, okay? But at any rate, long story short, is the answer to that question, if I'm so smart, why ain't I rich? Is you look at the subject areas. You know how many, because I've researched this, the Office of Bureau of Vital Statistics keeps track of these things. They're always taking, they love statistics.
Sure.
And that's the government, after all. They love statistics. They live by statistics. But at any rate, you know how many archaeologists there are in this country working professionally at any given time? Fewer than 100.
Really?
You know how many mycologists there are working in this country at any given time? Fewer than 10.
Wow.
So you can't make money on any of these subjects. Let me put it that way. There's no call for it. They did help me teach, because one of the things that I did, you'd have to say my last jobs, where I was a professor up at Mount St. Mary's College in Newburgh, where I taught history and all science subjects.
I was heading there. I was wondering, where does this education put you in terms of a professional career? What do you consider yourself? You said you were teaching at Mount St. Mary's, but what was your main source of income as you were growing from, say, 18 to, well, what are you now, 50, 55?
68.
Just kidding. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I was going to give you 60 tops.
Thank you. But I also, at the same time I was teaching up there, I was, for 12 years, I was a teacher for the Mahwah Board of Education, where I specialized in home instruction with kids that were too sick to go to school. That was a great gig. I liked that.
And you would have been real popular these last 3 years, wouldn't you?
Yes, I would have. I would have. And I tried to get back into it, but you know what the problem is? Everything is done now virtually. They don't need warm bodies.
Okay.
That's the problem. But at any rate, to answer your question, what was my main source of income? Where my pension comes from, I was a New York State forest ranger for 27 years.
Now, see, I always thought that would have been I want to use the word fun, but maybe enjoyable is a better word, because I'm more happier outside than inside.
I am too. Yeah.
And I've never learned to eat which roots, but recently I've picked up a book which I'm enthralled with. It's called The Lost Ways. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It kind of not borders it. It's based on what did our ancestors in the Conestoga wagons, that sort of time frame, maybe the 1800s or the 1700s, what did they know and how did they exist without refrigeration, without modern medicines? And it seems like it's the same venue that you're into the middle of.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a matter of fact, the postdoc that I did in botany and mycology came out of that, because all the years, I'm a lifelong woodsman. I would go out with my grandfather when I was 3 years old, and he'd take me out walking and say the Native Americans and the colonists, the early settlers, used this plant for so on and so forth. And I retained that. And I expanded upon it as I grew up, and in my profession, occupation as a ranger, I was always out there looking at these things. I'd find a plant, wonder what that is. Is it good for anything? And I'd research it, so on and so forth. So it grew out of that.
Where were you based mostly?
The Palisades region.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
okay. Do you ever walking in the woods, you ever come across any sign of Viking and explorers? There you go.
They're in here.
Okay, cool.
This one on the cover is one.
Is it?
That's one of them.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I know what I'll be doing, putting that on my Christmas list.
And that's, well, thank you. And this is one of the things that they say, well, why would they go to such trouble? Because these are big rocks, big as cars, some bigger than that.
People needed to see them.
That's exactly right.
Sure.
Okay, and I tell people, I said, 2 reasons. I said, you go hiking through the woods, you see these people have these little cairns of stones popped up all over the place.
That's cute.
Anybody can come along and just kick it and destroy it.
A good breeze or a nice Mexican burrito the next day would have knocked one of those over. Yeah.
And with these, you can't do that. Plus, they're designed so that they can be seen from a distance.
From, I would imagine,
to attract
traveling up the Hudson River, for example, right? What was the best mode of transportation for distances?
Water.
By ship.
Yeah.
So you can't exactly take out your binoculars in 1200 BC or what have you and find things like that.
They were on foot,
Yeah.
mostly, okay?
Yeah.
So that's just the simple, plain, dumb explanation for it.
Sounds pretty good to me.
You talk about low tech, that's about it.
Yeah.
You know? But, and I still, one of the things that I've been doing the last year is I've run across, after traipsing through these mountains all my life, the mountains around here, people have to remember that this was private land until a little over 100 years ago. And piece by piece, it was acquired by the state. And people lived on it. There were communities up there.
Yeah. And
individual residences and like this, all over on top of mountains, all over the place. And now I'm finally getting around to exploring where these roads and footpaths and cow paths and game trails that I found over the years, where they go.
Okay.
And I'm finding some go to where I go to the end and I find where there had been a farm or a house there. Okay.
Foundation maybe left over, building stones?
Stone foundations.
Yeah.
And you also see, again, here comes the botany. Okay. You have to know your plants. Because there are a lot of plants that you find around these houses that you don't belong. That don't belong there.
Yeah, there you go.
Daffodils, barberries. Was one place where I found one rhubarb plant growing in, so obviously somebody still had it. And they had, nobody had lived there since around 1952.
And where do they come from originally if they didn't belong there in the first place?
Somebody put them there.
No, I'm saying, were they from a European?
Yes.
Someone traveled with them? Or?
So many of these plants we have around here, do you realize that the dandelion is a European import?
My neighbors would hate, my neighbors hate me for dandelions.
For just one. In the early 90s, Trailside Museum at Bear Mountain, and I was part of it, they had a park region-wide botanical survey, and they had all kinds of experts coming in, and I contributed some to myself. And they found that there were over 16,000 species of plants, and over 400 were not native.
Yeah.
So they're all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, just like the dandelions in my yard, which I'm not real big for weed killer. So yeah, I spread love, joy, and dandelions.
Yep.
And my neighbors hate me, but they'll get over it eventually.
So that's brings you pretty much up to date. That is I haven't been able to make a living, much money on any of these things, but I never really expected to.
Okay.
But they were subjects that I liked.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know more about it. And I said, well, I know a lot about these things because people would tell me. I'll get up. Just the other day I was at someplace and I got on the subject of something and she couldn't get rid of me.
or didn't want to.
Yeah, and this is what happened. I said, well, so I got sheepskins to document that I know this stuff.
Gotcha.
So that's pretty much it, and it's ever expanding. I'm finding more and more things, and as I find as I travel find out where these paths go.
Yep.
And some of them just go near the top of a mountain and just stop, like they never finished it.
Or it wasn't really any reason to go any farther. Who knows?
And in places I can see where along the way they would run to a rock ledge. And I could see the dynamite holes.
Oh.
So they went to the trouble of blasting it, and they went another couple of 100 yards and stopped.
Okay.
So why? I have no explanation for that part of it.
Maybe the house fit there and that was enough.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
but it's interesting to do all this stuff. And now I'm, these places I always wondered, I remember always saying, well, I wonder where that goes. Now I'm finding out.
Yeah. Well, you and my grandmother would have gotten along really well on the plant and the mushrooms. She was always our source for, which mushrooms can you eat and which ones can't you. And I love to always tell the story to my friends that growing up as a kid, we always were small town of Waverly, New York. It's about 40, 45 miles farther west on 17 past Binghamton. Little town of Waverly. And my grandmother and grandfather, they did wonders for us as kids. My grandfather couldn't wait to go fishing. I learned how to fish by the time we were 4 or 5 years old. Bait the hook, tie your own swivel, blah, blah, blah. My grandmother, her and her plants. As kids, we sort of grew up or got started not realizing that most people boiled their corn. We were just yanking the husks off of sweet white corn in the field and eating it raw. And how many kids or people today would say, "You ate raw corn? Didn't you get worms?" or something stupid like that. And or berries, and who's making what kind of jelly this week? My grandmother, we went and picked a gazillion pounds of raspberries, and that made us thrilled because guess what we got? Tons of raspberry jelly, fresh raspberry jelly. And then one year there was a blight, drought, a blight, what have you. My grandmother figured out, well, if I take enough green tomatoes and pulp them and add a little of this and a little bit of raspberry jello, I can make the kids happy. And so sure enough, she made do. And she was very big. And I've inherited several of her, modern, or modern medicine plants that would, take the place of our modern medicines. Healing, how to eat dirt or why to eat dirt and things, books of that nature. And so I treasured them, quite frankly. And the book that I said I picked up, The Lost Ways, it's got a number of things in there too. And every time I read it, another chapter here and another chapter there, or I go back and read something, things like how to make gunpowder from what's around, how to make a smokehouse, how to this plant, that plant, how not to starve, that sort of thing. And so it's fantastic. So I applaud you for following that kind of a life, whether it pays off financially or not, but you know what? If you needed it, it would pay off in spades.
I'm what they call a lifelong learner. I find fascination with, and when I get on something new, I'll read everything I can get my hands on, and then I'll move on to my next obsession, And you talk about the plants. There's also not just what you can eat and use medicinally, but there are things out there that I was shown growing up by my grandfather that are things like natural insect repellents and so on and so forth. And another item that I didn't know until fairly recently, I have somebody I've known since elementary school. She got interested in genealogy. And which is a subject that never caught my interest. I've always said that genealogy is only good for me if I find that it puts me in line for an inheritance. Other than that, I know who my grandparents were and some of my great-grandparents. Beyond that, I don't care.
I used to think genealogy was figuring out who Barbara Eden's relatives were.
That's cute. But at any rate, what I did find out from this one friend of mine who was really up to her eyeballs in genealogy, told me that I was a descendant of somebody who in the western part of Rockland County was and is in some small circles remaining a point of folklore. And this woman name was Phoebe Jane. And she was a full-blooded Mohawk princess.
Wow. And
how she ended up down here was a man, one of the Conklins, was working upstate for a company who was in they were in the shipbuilding and forest and lumber industry, and working near the Mohawk Nation, and they fell in love. She was the daughter of the chief. And he went to the chief and asked permission to marry her, and the dowry was a bushel of apples.
What year are we talking about?
Like 1830 at the latest.
Well, princesses were going cheap, huh?
Yeah, those days. So at any rate, so they got married and came down here, and she became like a midwife she would go around birthing babies. She had 7 kids and she birthed her own. She would go out in the field and come back with a baby. You know?
Wow.
And then she would go, also became an herbalist. And cases where somebody was, the doctors, traditional doctors had declared them incurable, they'd get in touch with her and she'd go over there and mix up something like this and make them well.
Yeah, I could see that.
I didn't know about this woman. That I was related to her. She was, I think, the great grandmother of my grandmother, something like that. And this is what she did. So it's, if there's anything to be said for things being passed down through genes, maybe that gene found me. I don't know.
Maybe so.
But at any rate, so I'm very interested in hearing about this stuff. So this, and I, in some small way, I'd like to think that I'm carrying it on too by telling people about it.
Now, have you considered ancestry and having, you know, or maybe, you know, like, for example, my daughter wants to check out what breeds are
right,
in
Ancestry.com and
Yeah.
all like that. No, I've never, no, again, that was a total surprise to me, and I'm pleased that I didn't find out I was any horse thieves in the family or something.
Yeah, you don't know that.
Yeah, it still could be, you know.
But the question is not so much Ancestry.com, I guess, but did you have, like, for example, can you check your gene pool and see who's swimming around in there? Are there really Indians? Is it really true? Could be a story, could be a tall tale.
Could be.
Could be something for you to look into. You never know.
It could be, but she's fairly well documented. There was a lot of people she's buried in the Brick Church Cemetery.
Oh, off of
306.
306.
Yep, out there someplace she is. So at any rate, so there's a lot of interesting stuff out there, and sort of segueing in the other subject that I'm presently heavily involved in, other than masonry, is that, well, before I leave that, I should say, explain how far I advanced Masonically, okay, is I have completed all 32 degrees in the Scottish Rite.
Myself as well.
And so I have my
Actually, I misspoke. I'm shy of 3.
3, okay, so
Yeah.
I did all 32 of those.
So you have a golden passbook?
Yes, that's it. I'm a golden passport member.
Yeah.
And I also have done every chair, mostly in New Jersey.
Okay.
In Hawthorne, Fortitude, and Ramsey, where I was, let's see now, so 3 years ago, this month, I was Worshipful Master there.
Oh, okay.
And I did my term plus half of my predecessors. His work took him to Mexico or something like that, so he couldn't finish.
His cable tow dragged him away.
Yeah. So at any rate, so I've done that. I've pretty much, you know, done all of those things. All the things you can earn, I've done. Okay, there are other things that, like the 33rd, which you have to really distinguish yourself in order to get that, and I don't expect to win any wars like Eisenhower and MacArthur did, or discover penicillin like Sir.
Was that Jonas Salk?
No, or find a polio vaccine or anything like that.
Yeah, that's it.
Or any such thing as this. But and Billy Graham and Oral Roberts got the 33rd degree for bringing millions to Jesus.
Okay.
So kind of on that note, I'll segue over to my other. Alexander Fleming was the one, the Englishman who discovered penicillin.
Now, is the 33rd, is it achievable, or is it a good old boys award?
And the outside looking in, it's more of a thing of like a cherry on top of the cake.
Okay.
Okay.
But you had to bake the cake and do it right.
But you got to do something really to get the recognition, to get to that point.
Fair enough.
But at any rate, so what I'm doing now is that I'm several years ago now, this will be 6 years this summer, I became an ordained pastor.
Yes.
Again, I had that advanced degree in theology for years and did nothing with it.
And that doesn't automatically make you a pastor, minister, anything just because you have the degree? You have to be...
You have to pursue it.
Okay.
You actually have to, depending on where you go. In some places, if you go to a theological school, upon completion, you're ordained.
Like if you get out of medical school, you're a doctor.
Right, okay. But you don't always have to practice
Correct.
that,
Yep.
okay? A lot of people who go through medical school or law school end up teaching, okay? At any rate, getting back to my point, is I had it for 10 years. Again, as I said much earlier, it was a subject that I was always interested in. And I had done things which were ministerial for years that I didn't think of as being ministerial until other pastors started calling it my ministry.
Really?
And for instance, what it was I was conducting a hospice ministry.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me you just walked around with your own collection plate.
No, then I might have been able to make a couple of bucks on it, but that never occurred to me. But at any rate, I just thought I was being a good friend. I had friends who were terminally ill, and I would visit them and minister to them and so on, and give them whatever they needed.
Very honorable.
Which is more often than not, all they wanted was somebody to talk to and listen to them.
Yeah.
Okay, and show that they cared. And dealing with this was very difficult because these were long-term, if not lifelong friends who I knew their time left was limited. It was very difficult. So I very often had to lean on the shoulders of pastors and say, how do you deal with this? And the answer I always got was, nobody knows how to do it.
Right.
What you have to do is be there and listen. Let them carry the ball and tell you what's bothering them, and then you listen. So after several of these, the last of them passed, and I didn't do anything at even that for a long time. And then, so I got credit for that, and I got letters of recommendation from other pastors, and I was able to document some of the things that I did. And I got credit for that on my way towards a doctorate in theology. And I had that for, as I said, 10 years and didn't even think of doing anything with it. And what really pushed me over, several years ago, seeing all these reports on television of cops being assassinated.
Yeah.
I said, I got to do something to help these people. What can I do?
Really?
And I said, well, I'm going to put that to work. So I contacted an organization out in Nevada, which I had spoken to years earlier when I completed it, but never followed through. Chaplains International, which is the largest and oldest of the chaplaincy organizations in the world.
Okay.
Matter of fact, the president of it is a chaplain in the prison system out in Nevada and California.
Is this mostly like, mail and online communications, or do you have local chapters? Do you have places to see people you can rely on or go to?
My most recent conversation with him said that they've been doing a lot of work in Florida and in South Dakota. There's been a lot of call for it, and they're just doing seminars and stuff there. So at any rate, I spoke to him for about an hour, and I told him what I had been doing and what's moved me to contact him. And he said, I'll tell you what, you write up a narrative, what you've done and what you want to do. You get us some letters of recommendation from these pastors and any other sort of documentation. Send us your transcripts. And the ordination committee meets once a month.
Okay.
This was in around Memorial Day.
You said about 10 years ago now?
This is now 6 years this summer.
Oh, okay.
And so I had most of that on hand already. And I just had to get a couple of other pastor friends to, write a letter of recommendation and so on. And I sent it in, and I got it in before the end of June when they met.
Perfect.
And he called me and said, it's here, it arrived, and I'm going to bring it up at the next meeting in upcoming days.
Okay.
So they did that, and he got back to me around early first week of July, and he says, well, we've looked at it. He says, you're in. He says, you more than surpassed our requirements.
Wow, terrific. Congratulations on that.
So it came right through. And while I was waiting for the diplomas to come in, I had already a plan. This is I'm always thinking ahead to things. I'd be a good chess player if I knew how to play, but I think I'd be good because I could see so many moves in advance.
Yeah.
So while I was waiting, I had already sent out, I contacted the superintendent of the state police in Albany, and who got back to me, and his answer just floored me.
What was the question?
The question was, I'm now an ordained pastor, and I want to serve as a chaplain to the state police. I'm notifying you. What more can I do for you? So he got back to me, and it floored me. His answer was, he said, think as big an organization as long as they've been around. He said, the state police, New York State Police, have never had a chaplaincy program.
Oh.
I couldn't believe it.
That is odd.
So he contacted the local, which is Troop F down in this area. And I went and visited with the captain up in Middletown and the local sergeant here off of exit 13. And thankfully, I have to say thankfully, they never have needed me for anything. And I told them at the time, I said, I hope you don't, because if you do, it's going to be something horrible.
Yeah, I was wondering what you would have expected to be called for.
You know, accidents. And on top of that, I contacted every police department in Bergen County, Rockland County, and Orange County. So they all know my availability. And so far, I haven't been contacted. They had said sometimes if somebody dies in a car accident or something like this, we would have to send a senior officer with a priest out to their house and notify them.
Okay.
And then we would do that with me instead. Fortunately, or God forbid, a cop gets shot or something. Fortunately, they haven't.
That's what I was thinking you were leading to with that. You'd be going to officers, either widows or widowers, what have you.
If needed, I would,
Yeah,
yes.
of course.
But on the other hand, I'm also with the fire service. Matter of fact, I'm a charter member of the Rockland County Fire Chaplains Association.
Are you a fireman as well?
No.
Okay.
No. And my timing was perfect because I approached my Stony Point at a time when their lead chaplain, who is the senior chaplain, now chaplain emeritus in the association, was past 90 and he has Parkinson's. He's a lifelong friend of mine. And he knew that he couldn't do that much anymore.
Right, it gets
so they were
difficult.
looking for somebody. So my timing was perfect.
Okay.
And his weight carries an awful lot. His voice carries an awful lot of weight. So I got in there. Next, right as that happened, the association was forming. So everything just fell into place. Okay. And I'd like to think when things happen just like that the good Lord's hand's on it.
Yeah, and I'm also assuming that just like the mushroom business, there's no money in it, but you're doing it for a love of the activity, the potential for a service to mankind.
Yes, exactly, in the community and so on and so forth. And I also do the same with veterans, and I'll tell you a quick story about veterans as
Admirable, and I'll cheers you for that.
So thank you. One of the things that's as an outgrowth of this, a year ago, and I mentioned that here, that I began a service which I couldn't find any place that was doing this, anyone that was doing this. I was getting the word out that if there's, and I knew of people in this situation, people who wanted to go to get communion, but they couldn't physically get to church to get it.
Sure.
So I got the words out. And the first one that I did this with was this gentleman I told you that helped me get in as a chaplain.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing this. I'm getting out to people who would like to get communion but can't get it. So I'm visiting them and making a pastoral visit out of it to begin with.
That's terrific. I'll tell you what, while we have you here, if you want to announce to our audience what best way to communicate with you, is it through email? Do you have a website? What would you prefer? If someone wanted to, if they see this one day and say, hey, you know what? I think that Andy guy, I might want to talk to Reverend Dr. Andrew and see what he can offer or help me with.
Well, one thing you could do would be to contact the Wayne Hose Fire Company in Stony Point.
Okay.
And they could contact me.
Stony Point, New York,
Right.
Rockland County.
Right. Another would be everybody at Town Hall knows me. You could get me there.
Also Stony Point.
Right. But also at the Fire Training Center.
Pomona, New York.
Right, is where we hold many of our chaplain associated meetings.
Great.
And also directly. Well, I'll give you my telephone number, which is 845-942-5063.
And we can post that on the episode today as well.
Right. And my email is as10984@aol.com.
Okay.
And I've been asked to do is participate in funeral proceedings. I've performed 2 weddings this year.
Congratulations. Were any of them yours?
No. One was to a West Point cadet on her graduation day.
Oh, wonderful. I think you were here
when
in Lodge and you told us about it.
Right. And your senior warden, Mike, was the one, his best friend was the
Junior warden. Junior warden. Our other Mike.
Senior warden.
Sorry, our other Mike is senior warden. Yes, you're right.
And his best friend was the groom.
I remember that too. Yeah.
And they put me in touch, and it worked out fine. So she went in one afternoon, she went from the graduation field to the wedding chapel.
Wow.
So she'll never top that the rest of her life, unless she becomes an astronaut or something like that,
Well, day ain't over yet. You never know.
It's true. So at any rate, that and I'm, just helping people, and the respect that I get is unbelievable.
Sure. Well, I would say it should be believable. Why wouldn't you be respected?
It's just amazing how when I go, and I don't even have to wear my clerical collar, which I often do.
Yeah.
But just when I go and I'm introduced as a chaplain.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't do enough for me.
That's wonderful.
It's wonderful. After having worked for the state all my life and being treated like the worst you can be treated, and ignored.
Yeah,
it was a totally new experience for me.
I know for the work you were doing in those past X amount of years as a ranger, it wasn't exactly a financial windfall for you, was it? But it was rewarding. And I
like being outdoors.
Yeah.
And I still do.
So you have a couple of extra other books, I see.
Right. I brought a couple others out of my stack.
Also your favorites, I assume?
Some of my favorites, yeah. They're all of my favorites.
A few of your favorite things there, Julie Andrews.
Some of them. But another one that I wrote is speculative about history and developments in science. They called it What If.
Okay.
And it covers a lot of different things that I've pondered over the years. One of the ones you talk about happenstance and how history and events, one little thing has a cascading effect down the line. And one of the more interesting ones, and us as Masons who are interested in history, especially history of this country, how many people, I have met very few that are actually aware of this fact, that in the beginning of this country, at the First Continental Congress, the first order of business was, and today it might seem strange, but it was a fact, was what language to do business in.
Really? All the way back then?
Back then. And the reason for that was that at that time, there were actually more people in this country who spoke German than English.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
You go to upstate New York, Herkimer County, it's German.
Yes,
Pennsylvania was all German. The South was founded, settled.
The stocking, leather stocking area, Amsterdam.
Right, up that way. Yeah. And you go down south, the South was founded and colonized by English, Scotch-Irish, and Germans. And a lot of the delegates at the Continental Congress were German and spoke German. So they put this to a vote, and after much debate, English won, but only by one vote.
Really? Was there that many German people?
If it went the other, just think, if it went the other way, how history would have been changed, world history would have been changed for that.
Well, I got the haircut for it.
But I'll give you, point that out.
Yeah.
Is that we've always talked about the special relationship we have with England because of the common language, okay? Which is true. Even though we started out as enemies, that language brought us together throughout history.
Technically, we started out as immigrants.
Right.
Right? Wasn't the Plymouth Rock and what have you? And
Yeah, exactly. So you can imagine, you look at 20th century history, what would have happened if we had a special relationship with Germany instead? We would have either stayed out of World War I altogether,
possibly.
or gone in on Germany's side.
Yeah.
If that had happened, the Treaty of Versailles never would have happened.
I guess it depends on how far-reaching those roots would have held up.
Right. And if the Treaty of Versailles never would have happened,
yeah,
Hitler never would have had an argument to rise to power.
It's a big what if, man. It's a big what if, though, isn't it?
Just think about that.
Sure.
One person
I'm picturing it.
could have changed all of that. And there's a lot of other things in here. Let me see if I can find. And by the way, this was in large part the dissertation for my last.
All right, I'm going to read that out. Current issues in physical and life sciences. Okay.
Right. And it was, let me think here. And it was another postdoc, a Lit.D, or Doctor of Letters, they call it.
Okay.
And I'll tell you one thing that the dean of the college just went completely gaga over.
Oh, good.
Was my critique of the multiverse theory in here. And there's not enough time to go into that.
Oh, that's okay. We all saw the Doctor Strange and Spider-Man movie, so we got the multiverse down.
But I'd have to spend a great deal of time filling you in on quantum mechanics and a lot of other heavy, high-handed things.
Why? Do you want to see me start drooling?
So
yeah, no, we don't have that kind of time. But
at any rate, so he just loved it.
Cool.
Because my take on the multiverse theory is different from what you're hearing out there. Okay. So at any rate, these are just, three of the many titles that I've had.
Wow.
And I mentioned before we went hot on the air is that one of the other ones that I hope we can do in the future is do one live out in the field, where I can take you guys out and show you out in the forest lands around here about the plant life.
Is there anything outside of your realm of interests that you find is like a worthwhile or a notable charity that you want to talk about for 2 seconds? What makes you happy when you drive down the road and see something?
Well, I'll answer that and keep it Masonic.
Sure.
Because it's definitely fits that. The day after Ground Zero happened, I was heading south on the Palisades Parkway, and I got off at exit 13. And what passed me was a Masonic bloodmobile heading down there.
I've never seen that.
It came from Utica.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And that made me so proud to be a member of this fraternity.
Yeah.
We were one of the first organizations to go there in that tragedy.
Have you been to Masonic Home up in Utica?
No, never been to that.
It's quite a nice place.
So I've heard.
Yeah.
And another thing is that I'm ever finding out more. And right now, I'm involved in this. I have a friend who lives in North Carolina, and she a couple of year or so back, her kidneys completely shut down.
Oh, that's rough.
And so myself and other family friends are trying to get her a kidney. And they asked me about 2 weeks ago what I could do to help with all of my connections, okay? And a year ago, how I got involved in this so personally was her husband was getting ready to visit her in the hospital. And while he was getting ready, he unfortunately fell down a flight of stairs and broke his neck. And he ended up in the hospital too.
Wow.
Okay. And he laid there for 5 hours before anybody found him.
That's a bad hand of cards you got dealt.
Yeah. So he ended up there, and he was there for 3 months. and he was not getting the right care for it. To give you an idea, he went in August, and we got him out almost to November. 3 months, he did not see a neurologist in 3 months.
Really?
Which is it's just amazing.
With a broken, you say neck?
Broken neck. He was just laying there. They weren't doing anything for him. So at any rate, one of his executors and his son, they asked me if I could, they started asking me different things. You know a lot of people. First they asked me if I knew of a doctor that they could talk to who could help them. And one of my personal physicians is an orthopedist and a rehab specialist. He used to be the director of rehab at Helen Hayes Hospital.
Well.
I put her in touch with them, and she told them exactly what needed to be done.
Very reputable place, Helen
Right.
Hayes.
And said, get him up here in the Morristown Medical Center. And she said she had done it when she was an intern, did a cycle there. Mm-hmm. And they had worked that out. And then she said, where do I know anybody who could help them get him in a rehab facility anywhere near there? Matter of fact, one of the guys I'm in lodge with down in New Jersey manages such places. So I talked to him and had them in it. They had it all worked out, brought him up, put him in a place right next door to the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And unfortunately, and they brought him all the way up, flew him up from North Carolina. Unfortunately, just as they got him settled in, he passed away that night.
Really?
So his wife is still down there. So they remembered that, and they said, you know an awful lot of people in the right places. Can you help? So I started immediately. I got on the case. I called the Grand Lodge, and they gave me different people that's one of the charities that Masons have, is they're very big in organ transplantation and finding people and donors.
Well, you know the story of our Grand Lecturer.
Yes, that's what I thought of when I heard that.
Yeah.
When she asked me. So I spoke to them, and they they got the ball rolling. Then I thought to myself, why limit myself to that? I also know he was and he got me into this, a Knight Templar, not the Masonic Knight Templar. Was a member and highly regarded too, of the Sovereign Military Order of the Knights of Jerusalem, and he got me into that. So I contacted them. Now they're involved.
Now that's a non-Masonic group.
That's a non-Masonic organization. Okay, it's a military group.
Were you part of the military as well?
No.
Okay.
No. But at any rate, so now I have both the Masons working on helping her get on a list, and the Knights Templar, and he was a member down there as well after he moved down there.
Okay.
And so I've got a lot of people are reading this.
Well, it sounds like you're a great facilitator for people in need. And you know what? I think your reverendship, your ministry, it sounds like the right calling for you as well.
I think so too. And it's a very circuitous way that I found it.
Regardless, you got there.
And it took me after more than 60 years to find it.
But you know what?
I found it.
You got there right when you were supposed to, didn't you?
Everything fell into place.
Good for you. I'm thrilled to have you today.
Mm-hmm. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank
you. And we appreciate your time. And Mike and I were, talking amongst ourselves. That's Mike on the mic over there. And we were kind of looking forward to this quite a bit.
I was.
And you didn't let us down.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And so you're amazing with your 60 books. Usually, I've started my first book, actually. Matter of fact, I finished my first book. Now I'm going to read another one. Yeah.
That's cute.
That's about it. And if it doesn't have pictures, I'm not real big on it, but I might start something soon.
Many more episodes to follow, I hope.
Well, listen, thanks very much.
Okay.
And I'm going to wish you a great night.
Thank you.
And I really want to wish you success and continued success, in your calling. Mm-hmm. Whatever that may be, and however you're helping people, everybody needs another friend someday.
You can never have too many friends.
I agree.
I found that out.
And if you want to get rid of some of your friends, just lend them money.
You'll never see them again.
That's the original social distancing.
Right.
You want to, I got a few bucks. You'll never see them again. That's how you get rid of friends. You just buy them off. Anyway, hope you have a great night, and thanks again. We look forward to seeing you soon.
I do too. Thank
All
you.
right. And by the way, you can follow us as well. We'll send you a link, but we are on YouTube, The Freemasons Happy Hour. And if you're on Instagram or Facebook, Instagram at The Freemasons Happy Hour. We have our website for Stony Point, which is our lodge here in Spark Hill, New York, spw313.org. And am I forgetting anybody? I think that's about it. Like and subscribe to us when you go to YouTube. It helps us. We get more hits. We like to spread the word. And you can share us as well. Send the link to your friends. Let them see what we're doing. Let them see what you've done today. I think it's great. It'll help spread your word. It'll help spread our word. And we'll spread a little peace and joy to everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
It's been my pleasure.
Ours too.